Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm David Eglin, President of the Society for Contemporary Art at the Art Institute of Chicago. We are most pleased to present tonight's program with Suzan Frecon. After a video presentation of Suzan in her studio, a live Q&A session with the artist will follow. We want to thank Prada for sponsoring our program tonight. Closed captions are available by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Attendees are encouraged to submit questions for Suzan by using the Q&A feature also at the bottom of the window. Before our programming chair, Patty Sternberg, introduces tonight's speaker, I want to take a few moments to highlight a few upcoming SCA programs. On April 6th, we are excited to host Netherlands-based artist Evelyn T. Wang, who will be giving an in-person performance at the museum entitled Layers of Vocalization. This program is made possible by the support of Prada. Also in April, the SCA will offer a members-only exhibition viewing of Ikshan Adams' Desire Lines on April 14th. This evening offers a distinct opportunity to privately experience the exhibition with fellow SCA members and enjoy an introduction by Hendrik Volkerts, curator of international contemporary art at Moderne Musik. A reception will take place beforehand and is generously sponsored by Christie's. We are also looking forward to the return of the SCA-sponsored performance series Iterations on April 23rd, with a performance by Paulina Aloska at the Art Institute. Finally, the highlight of every season is our annual meeting, taking place in person this year on May 5th at a new venue for us, the Arts Club of Chicago. As previously announced, our members will be weighing in on the SCA Engagement Fund, as well as our slate of officers for 2022-23. We will also be hosting scholar Darby English, who will be discussing the legacy and impact of SCA acquisitions on the collection at the Art Institute. We hope that all members will be able to join us for this special evening. Production of the event is sponsored by Christie's. For more information on upcoming programs and events, please visit the SCA website at scaaic.org. Now I'd like to turn the camera over to Programming Chair Patty Sternberg to introduce tonight's speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We are honored to be hosting Suzan Frecon as our final SCA virtual program of the season. Suzan's presentation was pre-recorded, and the artist will be joining us for live Q&A tonight. Suzan Frecon is known for her abstract oil paintings and works on paper, which have been a lifelong practice. Made over long stretches of time, Suzan's work embodies the durational activity of painting itself. She invites the viewer's sustained attention. In Suzan's paintings, composition serves as a foundational structure, holding color, material, and light. Her compositions are characterized by asymmetrically balanced forms in precise spatial and proportional relationships. She mixes pigments and oils to differing effects. Color and contrasting matte and shiny surfaces heighten the visual experience. Suzan has exhibited widely in the United States and internationally. In 2008, her work was the subject of a major solo exhibition, Form, Color, Illumination, Suzan Frecon painting at the Menil collection in Houston, Texas, which traveled to the Kunstmuseum Bern in Switzerland. She has participated in a number of group exhibitions, such as the 2000 and 2010 Whitney Biennials. In 2016, she received the Artist Award from the Artist Legacy Foundation in Oakland, California. Suzan's work is featured in many major public institutions, including the Art Institute of Chicago, Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive, Harvard Art Museums, Kunstmuseums Bern, the Menil Collection, the Morgan Library and Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the Museum of Modern Art, National Gallery of Art, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and the Whitney Museum of American Art. Now we are very pleased to share Suzan's presentation on her process. Please remember to submit your questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Suzan will take a few audience questions at the end of the program. Thank you.
Thank you to the Society for Contemporary Art of the Chicago Art Institute, and to David Zwerner, Bellatrix Subert, Rebecca Holmberg, and the David Zwerner staff, and to Marcelo Durand. The beginning of a large painting is usually a long way from its realization. Oil dries slowly and the work, so I can consider the work, engage it over long periods of time. And when I put it on wet, it dries differently. The look is different when it dries. So I have to let things dry before I can look at them and think where I want to go from there. So, you know, it's in many stages, a large painting. And the edges of the color next to color are not hard and crisp. I do them by hand, and I build the colors so that they have more than one dimension or facets as you witness the painting's movement. And the painting is held by its composition, by its outside format, by the orchestration of the color, material, light, and paint handling. That all comes into the reality of the painting when it's finished. And the ultimate stages for me are the most exciting, because maybe not so much in this painting, but in some of my other paintings that are built up in more layers, it starts to come off the wall, so to speak, and it comes into the space between the viewer and the painting. And that's when it starts to become what I want it to be, the experience and the art, I hope. So the color could be said to be the driving force in my paintings. The indigo, this is indigo and a mixture of pink. Now, the pink ovoid is kind of a presentation, it's a concrete presentation of light itself. I made a very hot pink. And usually when I'm wanting to use pink, I use a mixture of earth colors and white, because I admire so much. One time, years ago, I was in Italy, in Bologna, and the warm walls of the buildings were so beautiful. They were in earth tones, warm earth tones. And that stays with me through many, many years when I think of pinks. But in this case, I did not use earth pigments. I wanted a very bright pink, a striking hot pink. And so I just mixed together cadmium, scarlet, and lemon yellow, and I hit the pink I wanted right away. It was, but I did the indigo first before I did the pink. So the indigo was built up in thin layers. Indigo is a dye, it's not a pigment. So it's thin, but when you build it up, it starts to take on a substance. So you can see in this indigo, in this image of the painting, you can see brighter blue coming from, that's thinner, and it's coming from the ground. So it's light coming from within the painting. And then on the eggplant, the purple color, the eggplant, it's sort of a eggplant color. The light is hitting the surface of the material and coming off that. So in one color, you have many colors, you have many dimensions in the color and many tones in the color, which for me is very exciting. And I love using indigo. I've always used indigo, and I build up the layers little by little. And then I mostly stop when there's still a little light coming from behind. So I did the indigo, and then I left it white for a while, because I wanted to be sure what was going to be the middle, and I settled on pink, on the hot pink, and it worked. I was happy with this painting. This is a picture of the same painting in natural light in my studio with the light coming from the left side. This is the plan for that painting, which the plan is made up of 4 irregular quadrants that I precisely figured out in relation to the surround within the rectangle. I find this shape in that surround. I liked it, so I went with it, and it's as simple as that, but it's complicated to get there. So I'm going to explain a little bit how I start. These 2 lines are the mean of the stretcher bars I use. So this is the width and this is the length. And then when I have my supports built, I have them built precisely in this measure. And that generates, the outside measure generates the composition on the inside, and the way I paint the composition, the way I work on the painting so that it finally builds out to come into the room with you visually. And in this side, it's a double stacked golden rectangle. And on this side, it's a side-by-side golden rectangle. So in the bottom sketch, how do I was doing paintings where I broke into the rectangle and I put this cross measurement. So that's the basis of everything that I'm doing right now. I decided at some point that I wanted to curve the line, but have this surface in proportion to this surface, so that the curved area would be in the same proportion of area. And so that's how I get to my curves and how I devise them and work on them. And this is the history of the painting, which I often go back to refer. It's very useful. And I learned the hard way that if I keep records of the paintings, sometimes I need to go back and look at how I made a color or recreate the same color, and how many layers I used, and how long it took to dry, what the ingredients were. And this is again a view in my studio, and you can see the nice big windows. I paint only with natural light because the light is constantly changing, and to me that makes the painting richer, and it allows the painting to give to the viewer the maximum of its possibilities. If the painting doesn't have those innate possibilities painted into it by the artist, that happens, and the light shows it. But when you have a great painting, say, a Vermeer even, or a painting in a church, and it's illuminated with natural light, it gives you so much more as a viewer than one way of seeing it in one artificial light way. So this is another plan for bright lanterns. It consists of not 4 quadrants, but 2 quadrants. They're in an unbalanced equilibrium. And this is the painting. It's a large painting, and I used indigo. And this indigo is a little bit more dense, so there's less light coming from underneath it and more violet light being thrown off the surface of the material. The composition is very important too, like the light. There's no need for the embellishment of story for me. You're not looking at it so much as you're in it and with it, and the scale precisely and deliberately and resolutely enhances the effect on the viewer. And it's not a trick, it's just viewer to work. So this is a composition that evolved. It evolved probably from my work in the mid 2000s. I don't know exactly when. We're going backward in time. So I started this basic composition of 5 colors, little by little. First of all, it was a composition in 2 colors. I used indigo and an earth red here and an earth red here and indigo. Those were the first ones. I did many variations on the double earth color and the indigo color that went back and forth from void to form. And I liked that confusion. And during that period, I was reading this book by Fulcanelli called the Le Mystère des Cathédrales. And I read this one passage that said, he said that he described the cathedrals as originally being painted in many colors. And I just visualized in my mind how wonderful that was to see these master works that I've seen in plain stone. There were no colors on them. The stone was incredibly beautiful and had its own color, but to think of them in many colors in my mind just fired up the idea of doing a series of what I called cathedral variations. Of course, they're not cathedrals, they're paintings, but cathedral, can mean many things. It can mean a masterwork of another culture, such as pomo baskets. They're the pomo cathedrals are their baskets. But anyway, I thought, I can do my same composition with 5 colors instead of 3 colors. And so I went forward and I started doing combinations and variations in cathedrals, and I've done many of them, and I'm going to show you some of them. So this is the most recent one I did. It's called Libre Vermel. I titled it after, because I was using earth reds and earth colors, and I used this vermilion color, so I titled it Vermel, meaning red book, because I also turned the cathedrals into the title Book of Paints, so it came from both the book and some music. Music is very inspiring to me, and I often listen to music, and it comes into my work, into my realm of life, whatever comes into my paintings. All of life comes into my paintings. So this one will be also in the exhibition in London at David Zwirner, and the whole floor will be variations on this basic bedrock composition. So I'll go on and show you. Here you can see a side view of the same painting in my studio, and the French raw sienna, which is kind of a green gold color that I like because it also, I used to work with gold because I was very struck by how when I was looking at medieval paintings and I looked at Cimabue, and if you walked around the painting, the gold would become a dark in the composition or a light. It would shift as you walked around into a light in the composition. So it would shift back and forth, and I was fascinated with that. And so I used gold in my paintings for a while, but for many reasons, I was spending too much time on gold, and I wanted to get back into spending my time on colors. So here I'm using a color to sort of stand in for the gold, shifting from dark to light in the painting, in the composition of the painting. Here's another view in my studio here. And these are color swatches. These are an idea for a future painting I want to do with those with that composition, variation on that composition. So I keep that here on my table right here, and I work out the colors by making lots of color swatches. And this is the history of the painting. The fifth color is usually the most difficult. I did all the other colors, and then the blue had to work with the other colors so that it would work coming out or going back and forth in the, not only in the plane, in the composition of the plane, but in the composition between the viewer, the space between the viewer and the painting. And I think that happens in this combination of colors. Some come out more depending where you're. So there are just so many ways of seeing a painting and experiencing it, if it's possible, if it's built into the painting. And I make a lot of sketches all the time, thinking about ideas and then which ones I'm going to go forward with in a big painting. And this is a picture that shows more sketches and some color swatches and tubes of paint. I have a lot of tubes of mixtures of paints, and I've noted on them what they were used for, which painting, what the date is, and the mixture, if I want to remake them or recreate them or use them again. Some of them I have enough paint left over to use in another painting. This is a medium-sized painting, and it's again a variation. Another one showing the slide, and the French raw sienna shiny is on the, and this is another medium size, and these are three. These are very tiny cathedral compositions, and at the top, this is an 8x10 painting on board. It's the book. I changed it, I evolved into a title, Book of Paint, instead of cathedrals. And this painting, this was a watercolor that eventually led to a series of paintings called Composition in 4 Colors. And I keep, this is in my studio in New York City, and I have I have some touchstones that I keep in my realm of working just because they sort of comfort me and make me know that they exist. And the color, this was from the Tale of Genji, the 12th century depictions of the Tale of Genjis, which I loved and which I actually saw in Japan. And the colors have faded in my book from the daylight. And this is an Islamic manuscript page, which I love Islamic miniature painting and calligraphy. And there was so much history of war and religion that I started thinking about how war and religion are one and the same. They just were the one and the same in England in the history and in the churches. I mean, where the Archbishop of Canterbury was murdered inside the cathedral. And so I started making a painting and plans called War. And so this is called War. But I stepped back from it. I didn't want to get into pictorial descriptions, which I was afraid this would become too much of a pictorial. So I never did. I did a few watercolors, but I never did actual oil painting called War. But I have a plan for it. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think I will ever get it done. And this is a very tiny, this is 4 by 5 inches. It's a little painting, oil on linen. And I went on, it was the seed of this big painting called Stone Cathedral. This is in Paris at David's Werner, Paris. And this is Fred Sandbach's work installed in Paris. It wasn't a show, but it made me very happy. I wish I could have gone to see it. This is on 20th Street in New York City, and it's an angled view of the painting. When you came into the exhibition, the first painting you saw coming in the entry door was this painting under the skylight. And then this painting was to the side. This is Yellow Lantern, it's entitled. So there were 2 paintings in this very beautiful, spacious room. And the floor also contributed to seeing the work. It has such a warm, dark feeling that works with the paintings. I think it was probably the best show I've ever had, and that's just my opinion. And this is the painting entitled Yellow Lantern, and I think it has a strong connection with Japanese culture, which I feel very I admired the visual culture so much in Japan, and the feeling, and so when I completed this painting up here in my studio, I was really happy that I had gotten to this place, this understated ambiance, where the painting conveyed some of the feeling I felt about Japanese, and even, it's not a lantern, but even the feeling of seeing the lanterns in the landscapes, and in the evening in the gardens and landscapes. And again, it's using the indigo, and you can see how red it is here. And this is a bad slide. I shouldn't even show this slide, but it shows the light on the surface. Actually, and I'm very happy, this painting was acquired by the Museum of Modern Art. And so it's in their collection, and I think they'll show it at some point. So for me, it's so rewarding to have paintings in public collections, because I'm rewarded by as many people as can see the painting as possible. That's my intent, and my reward is the experience of the viewer. And I was mixing the yellow color. It's a greenish Mars yellow pigment. And I mixed it with a lot of oil to get the shine. And then I have to let it dry flat so that it won't run off the painting. This painting is entitled Mars Indigo, after the colors I used. I wanted a very, very thin indigo in this case. So I mixed it very, very thin, and then I put it flat to work on it, and I worked on it, and I put it on the floor to look at it, and stood on a little ladder to look down to see how it looked. And I didn't like it, so I kept working on it. I worked on it all day, and I worked until the lights started to go in my studio. And I just thought it was a failure. I just thought, oh God. And it was so wet, I couldn't put it up. So I left it lie on the floor for 2 days. And then I came back to see it, thinking I'd have to start all over again. And like a miracle, I loved what I was seeing. I loved the effect of the indigo. It was just brushy, and it told its own, it manifested something that really resonated with my wanting to see it that way. So I went on with it, and I put the shiny Mars around it as the surround. And this is an angled view of it. And you can see the matte color and the shiny color changing and shifting and playing with each other, working with each other. This is another painting that was in the same exhibition, lapis lazuli, for the blue, true lapis lazuli, and the French raw sienna, and a side view, and another one. You can see they're hung low so that the viewer can have the fullest experience possible. And there are lights and darks happening with the reflections of the floor and the wall and the changes in the light. So this is again the same show, and this painting on the right is matte and shiny hematites, and here it's in the architecture of the show. I love this view because it shows the skylights and the architecture and the relationship of the painting and the architecture. And this is the painting front view. The color I'm mixing, I'm using hematites, which are red earth colors, and I'm using them in a liquid, brushy way, hence the title, Brushwood Hematites, of the painting. So we're going into Annunciata. I was working on a series of earth green and lapis paintings, and when I went to Sicily, and I had the wonderful opportunity to see the Antonella de Messina Madonna housed in the Scarpa Museum, the museum that was remodeled by this architect Scarpa, and she is wearing a blue veil, and she's swathed in this blue lapis lazuli blue that's painted so incredibly beautiful. I stayed in the room for a long time looking, but it was mounted on this vivid green velvet wall, and it worked. It was like a bold thing for the architect to do with this older masterpiece, to put it on a green wall this bright, but it was gorgeous. So I had the idea in my head, I could heighten my earth green, my terre verte colors. I could make them, raise them a pitch higher. And so that resulted in this painting, which I worked on quite a long time. It's a large painting, large scale. And this is mixing the lapis. And this is the diagram plan in reverse. This is another painting in that show. It's very bright cadmium yellow orange and what I call bluebird blue, which is directly influenced by the bluebirds flying around my studio behind me. They're like miracles when I see one in the gray landscape. And here again, installed. And this is titled, well, this is a painting. I've used earth colors, red earth colors a lot throughout my many decades of painting, and they're very important. And I want to show you some of those, but I came back to them in this painting. I'm using a mummy, red earth, and a vermilion, a bright vermilion. And the form stretches across the two panels. This is another painting that will be in the London exhibition. Again, I used lapis, French roll sienna, Nicosia green, and shiny Persian for this combination of colors. And I've done 3 versions of that. And again, my work table right behind me, the window here. This is where I'm sitting now. So I'm going to wind down by showing you some of the red earth paintings that I did. I've always been working in reds, and at first in the 70s and 60s, well, 70s more, I was working in cadmium reds, and I was doing big 4-panel paintings, and then I shrunk it down to 1-panel paintings, and I did a red painting. And I evolved. I had a trip to Crete, and I did a lot of paintings. I did a lot of watercolors from my visit in Crete. I was always interested in the red earth paint in the red earth pigments wherever I traveled. I traveled with my work. I couldn't afford really to travel on my own to India or to Japan, and now I can. But at that time, I had a show in Switzerland, so I took a side trip to Crete, and I did a lot of studies there because I was fascinated with the labyrinths and with how you looked at the ruins and you try to visualize when these were houses and storage rooms, and they stored the olive oil in one room and something else in another room, and they lived in another, and it all entered into my mind, and I loved Crete, but unfortunately I don't have pictures of any of those paintings. So this probably was in the 90s, and I was doing watercolors on this old Indian rag paper, and they came in the long format, so I had to compose according to the paper size and the format of it. But I was doing curved. I had gone into the curved realm of my paintings, but I loved using the red earths, and I did many watercolors using the red earths. And I'm just showing you a few from the 90s and early 2000s, stretching into up to 2010. These were from later. They were studies. These were studies for 4-color paintings, big paintings. And this is one. This was my first exhibition at David Zwirner. And I was able to show 3 of the red earth paintings. I did many combinations of the 4 red earths. They ranged from orange reds to more violet reds. But anyway, I was working with combinations of 4 red earths in this composition, and I titled this series Embodiment of Red, and they're large-scale stacked paintings, 9 feet tall, the double golden proportion. And I did quite a few variations of them. The first one I showed in the Manil, and then I showed 3 more at David Zwirner, and I kept doing them. These are the combination of Pompeian, Spanish earth, Persian red. Those were some of the titles. I entitled it Pompeian Persian. The red earths are a color that every culture used, and it was one of the first colors. The ochres and the red earths were the first colors that humans used to make paintings. They're very basic to our making paintings, and I like that association. It has nothing to do with the pictorial content, but maybe the forms do have a bit to do with the architecture. I'm sure they do. But anyway, these paintings are an important part of my work, and I wanted to show them, even though we went back in time again. And these are different combinations of different, and they were actually, I think they are an important part of my work, and they're more difficult. They're more difficult to see and to realize that it's very long. It takes me very long to do these combinations of vocabularies of red earth. And I feel very strongly, connected to them as an artist. Somebody once said that all paintings are self-portraits, and which is probably true in a way. They're also an escape from the self too. When I'm painting, I'm not thinking of if I have a bad day or if I'm having a problem. I'm thinking about the painting, so you really are escaping because your focus is so much in the work. And these have a real deep realization for me. Again, in another space at David Zwirner. This one ended up in the Manil collection, which I can't think of a better place to have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for preparing that presentation and sharing your process and inspiration with us. We have a few questions that have come from the audience. I have to open up my little Google thing, but I have a question. You showed us mostly painting, a few works on paper. How do your works on paper, how do they relate to the paintings?
Well, they're all everything is part of the same unity. I think the big difference is the proportions are measured in my oil paintings at this time. Mm-hmm. Before I just, before I got into that phase of my process, I was using more strokes, so the paintings were more connected to the paperwork, because I was doing the same thing, but I had to sacrifice. When I was working out these proportions, I wanted to strengthen my form, which I thought was the weak link of the work I was doing, that I didn't have a strength of composition, and I could see that in many other artists too. I felt like their work was weak in composition. So I got so focused on composition that I went into it full blast, wholeheartedly. But I still wanted to do the watercolors because I practiced on them. I was free to take them however I wanted to. And they did feed into my paintings with the color choices. But the watercolors had their own outside dimension. I didn't determine that. With the oil paintings, I determined the exact outside dimension that based on the human body and how the human being was looking at the painting and experiencing the painting. But the watercolor was predetermined by the paper makers, and I like the old Indian ledger paper, which I see one right up there over your shoulder. And that paper takes the paint so beautifully. It absorbs some of the paint, and yet some of it stays on the surface. And I noticed with the original painters like Vehicule and the anonymous Indian tantric painters, that they would always use this paper, because even though if it had holes on and it had writing on the other side and it was damaged, they loved it for the same reason. I knew that as a painter to painter with these people I never met, that they were using it for the same reason that I loved it, for how the paint got married, the marriage of the paper and paint. So I liked it that other things were determining how the direction of my painting and pulling it subtly in different ways that were kind of separate, but really part of the same unity. The paper, I had to bend to the will of the size of the paper and the material, but I determined what my measurement was, but the measurement was determining how my painting came out too. So I liked that third entity because I could distance myself a little bit in that way by having something else help to determine where I was guiding my work.
Thank you. Caitlin Haskell is asking, you've spoken so beautifully about the relationship between your paintings and the architecture in which they're presented. Could you say a few words about the thoughts that go through your mind when you install a space?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question, because I wanted to thank Annabelle Seldorf, the wonderful architect, the brilliant architect of the gallery spaces for David Swerner. And I've been, of course, the Menil, where I was also very fortunate to show my work, has magnificent architecture. So I jumped, that was thrilling to be invited to show there. And for me, I like to be part of the installation as much as I can, because for me, I feel that not only must the work itself be art as much as I'm capable of building it into the work, but also I want the installation to be art too, to be hand in hand with the art, so that the experience of the viewer can take place in the maximum possibility of what the artwork has to offer. And I've seen this in my travels when I go places and I try to look at work in a badly installed exhibition with bad light. It was a fight, you know, it was interference with the artwork. There were great things. I mean, in the first time I saw a Cimabue in Italy, the light was just so interfering. You had to walk across the church and put a coin in and then run to the other side and quickly see in this horrible artificial light, and then the light would go. But on the other hand, some of my most wonderful experiences were walking into an old Romanesque church, an old, you know, pre-Romanesque church in Italy, and seeing a Copo de Marcobaldo crucifix. And when you walked in the door, the light was so low, just coming from the windows, and you'd see this gold form picking up the low light and throwing it back at you. So you wouldn't see the figure at all. You wouldn't see the art, but you'd see this gold, bright gold form. And as you got closer and kept walking, then you'd start to see this figure that didn't even look human. And then you felt the art that was coming, and the outside dimensions generated and held all of that. And it was a memorable experience.
Adriana Spear asks, are you more connected to striking contrasts in color, such as the Indigo works, or more connected to subtle variations of color, such as the red earth work?
I have artistic license to do whatever I think is gonna provide an experience, and you are the judge finally as the viewer.
I have two more questions on color. One is, how do you select the colors? Do you have a visual on color before starting work?
I think it goes through time. You know, I've been working a long time, and one thing generates another. And, you know, I might use a color in one way and then discover that I can use it in another way, and it will be completely a different experience. So it's, you know, my knowledge comes from working with the colors, and all the colors have different properties. Each one has a different property. Some are very transparent, some are very opaque, and some absorb a lot of oil and some don't, and some take weeks to dry and others take. And all this is my education, where I'm learning by working and by looking at other artworks. Those two things, and talking to other painters sometimes.
One other question on color. Can you talk more specifically about?
A question. I think there was a question.
What?
The dog.
Yeah, the dog is.
Question.
She was doing pretty well for a bit.
Later.
Can you talk more specifically about how your layering of colors enriches the viewer experience?
Well, I don't want just one color next to a color. That's too flat. So I work with the colors until they start having a back and forth, they can recede or they can come forth. As I said, the most exciting part for me is when I get toward the completion of the painting and I'm fine tuning everything. I have to decide, am I going to go forward and put another layer, or is it okay like this? And it's just, over the decades, I've gotten a handle on it, and I control how I want to direct the painting. And does that answer the question? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I don't think it's not didactic. I don't set up, but I learn through experience.
Anonymous asks, with your clear regard and influence of Mediterranean culture from antiquity to early Renaissance and European architecture generally, can you speak briefly of the transport or that influence to your painting, which does not have a representational description as such?
Well, I come from, my background is from what was called minimalism in our time, and it is like a Western term which is meaningless because you see it in the cave paintings that are 30,000 years old. You see geometry and spareness, distillation to the essentials, and so I don't like to. I am very influenced by my travels in Italy and seeing Romanesque churches, but everything that I see comes into my experience of what pushes my painting one way or another. And there are so many. I mean, I haven't traveled a lot in Africa, but African art is a strong influence. Or not an influence, but an informative to my work, and I feel like humans have a common denominator in this way of communication, because it is not a verbal communication, but it's a common denominator to all of human culture, that we all have art, and we can appreciate art from various parts of the world, from every part of the world, just by looking at it and not knowing the language. Islamic art, any art.
Adriana asks, does a cloudy day versus a sunny day versus a snowy day or weather patterns affect your choices in value, hue, shape, orientation, etc.?
Well, any kind of natural light is beneficial. I look at my paintings in my studio in all weather, every weather. Now in winter, I feel a little pressured to get into my I don't have as many hours to work as in the summertime, when I can start, if I'm physically able, I can work many more hours through the day than in the winter. I just have a smaller window of time to mix my paint, to prepare. The preparation of what I'm going to paint on a big painting takes a long time, and it takes a full day, and often at 10 o'clock at night, I'm still washing my brushes. That's the last thing I do, because I don't need natural light to do that. So the weather, I'm at one with the sun. The sun rules. I understand why people consider the sun the god of us all.
Arnold Kemp, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Arnold Kemp says, thank you for such a generous and illuminating talk. Would you speak about the experience of mixing your own pigments? How does this enter your practice, and how is it reflected in your painting?
Well, the red earth pigments were always mixed, and some of them were very hard to mix and some were easier to mix, and I had to grind them, and it took up a lot of time. But with the red earth pigments, I wanted sheens. I didn't want real shiny and I didn't want real matte. I wanted to have plays of sheen. So I tried to orchestrate that. But I'm grind when I'm not using the red earth colors. I'm not spending as much time grinding my colors. I love Old Holland colors. They're great, and I use those straight or mixed. I mix my own, or I either use them out of the tube, and Rublev colors, and I use whatever works for the color I want. It's all my decisions are visual decisions. That's what.
David asks, can you comment on some of the notations on your plans? For example, I noticed multiple hash marks as if you were counting something. Can you talk about this since your process is so detailed and focused?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, because the little marks are, I'm counting the proportion of pigment to oil and to thinner. So I keep precise notes of that because it's very helpful to me down the road. It keeps me from making mistakes of having too much oil or not enough oil. And so and sometimes I lose my count because I have to really keep my mind on measuring so that I don't lose count. But that's what those little marks are. And for the big surfaces, I need a lot of paint. That's why I showed the pictures of the paint mixtures, because I can't just mix up a little batch of paint. I have to mix enough that it will cover the big surface, and so that takes me a long time to do, and then I have to allow enough hours to actually do the paint on the ground, on the support too.
We're just going to take a few more questions. Lisa Seafried asked a question that's kind of interesting. If you were a docent introducing your work to students, would you first ask them about the object of your inspiration, like cathedrals or earth, or would you start with the color and what that might remind them of?
I don't think either. I would try to work with them to see what they wanted to do, where they wanted to, and then I'd try to help them along maybe some of the technical aspects of how they could get where they wanted to go. But I don't think I answered the question about subject, because to me, that's all painting is abstract to me. If I look at a Velázquez, I'm looking at the paint. I'm not looking at the portrait of the king. I couldn't care less about the king, but I love the paint. It's just, it's like a miracle the way Velázquez applied his paint. So the subject in all painting for me is incidental. And I think somebody asked the question about the Romanesque painting, the frescoes, the early frescoes, and something about subject connected to them. And I don't think I answered that. I can't quite remember how the question was shaped. It's kind of that didn't connect with how I think when I'm looking at paintings.
We have a couple questions on materials. One is, what are those additional qualities of the paint you make yourself that you don't find in commercially available paint? And what medium of canvas paper do you usually prefer? I think you answered on the paper, but.
Okay, yeah, I'm painting on linen, but I don't like canvas, and I paint on a pre-painted oil ground. And I find that works best with the marriage of the paint that I put on. But linen has a lot of problems. It bags out very easily and it's so susceptible to humidity. And as for what was the first part of the question about the paint application? Why?
Yeah, what are the additional qualities of the paint you make yourself that you don't find available in commercial?
Yeah, the red pigments, it was almost like taking the actual red earths that I was seeing in Crete and many other places in Mexico. And the material, I just was so drawn to all the pigments at Kramer Pigment. When I go to Kramer Pigments, I wanted all the colors, and I have so many red earths in jars, and I'm just so connected to them, and I could mix them. They worked for my red earth paintings, and I still use them in my other paints, but there's no point in mixing an ultramarine blue because the manufacturers make beautiful, and they also make beautiful red earth colors. I can use, I really like to use red earths, but Kramer has a lot more vast range than you know, the manufacturers have certain red earths, Mars, Venetian, Persian, but I like them all. And it's actually much easier for me to use the manufacturer's ones, but they don't quite go into areas where I have used my own mixtures, but they're better made. They're better ground. It's futile to think that you can spend all your days grinding pigments. You won't have any time to paint.
We have one final question for the evening. Does your studio practice have a relationship to an archival practice? You referred to architecture and icons as points of departure. I am curious if for you, painting can be a kind of record keeping.
No. No, it's a thing unto itself.
I thought.
Every painting is a thing unto itself, and you see whatever you see in it. I just enjoy very much looking at so many things, but I don't try to paint pictures of them. The essence and the way that I look at them maybe you can compare, maybe you can equate how a painting affects a human viewer in the same way that you can equate how going into a church or seeing an African sculpture or the Nigerian indigo cloth woven by the women and the men, you know, it all is part of our being human.
Well, that concludes our program for this evening. And thank you again so much, Suzan, for your lovely presentation and generosity in sharing your practice with us. It was really fascinating. For those of you joining, thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing many of you in person at the Art Institute of Chicago for Evelyn T. Wang's performance on April 6th. Good night. And thank you again, Suzan.
Very much, everyone.